This is the Mandolin Player's Guide to Improvisation. Improvisation has always been one of my favorite subjects. It's a little mysterious, and it's a very unique thing about music, I think, that kind of attracts a lot of us to it. Duke Ellington called improvisation spontaneous composition. We're really writing as we go. But it really is a lot like language. You know, when you have a conversation, you don't necessarily have every word that you're going to say scripted out. And so you tend to speak sort of freelance, off the cuff. And that's really what's happening with music. And so the same way that you speak language, you need to know what the vocabulary is. You need to know what phrases you can put together. We're going to do the same thing with music, and so that's what we're really going to talk about in this video, is how we go about that. If you just keep in mind that a lot of the concepts that you create music with, even when you're composing, not improvising, but just composing when you have plenty of time to do it. Remember, improvising is composing in real time. All the concepts that you use to do that, and the concepts that all the stuff that music is made of, are the same things you're going to use to improvise with. So we're going to talk about the big four, and we'll elaborate on those, and we'll talk about all the tools you need, the vocabulary you need to improvise. We're going to take a G major scale, and we're going to look at 7 different chords that we can play that scale over. You probably know that you can already play your G major scale over a G major chord. You may already know that. What we're going to do is we're going to take the scale itself, and for each note of the scale we're going to attribute a chord to it, and when we see that chord pop up, we know that we can play the G major scale over it. So here's what we mean. So I start with a G scale, and I'm going to start on a G note, and the chord that's going to belong to that in the key of G is going to be a G major chord. Okay? So when I see that chord, I can play a G major scale over it. You have a lot of tunes in folk music and bluegrass that actually will almost stay on that chord the whole time. So that means you could play any of your G scale notes the whole time. Alright? So I take the second note of the scale as A, and the chord that's going to belong to that is going to be A minor. So if I see an A minor chord pop up, I can play my G major scale, right? Because all these chords are made up of G scale notes, and we'll talk about that. So the third note of the scale is B. The chord that's going to belong to that is B minor. So if we just stop right here, if you look at B minor, A minor, G, if I saw a chord progression that went like that, maybe back to A minor, you don't have to know a B minor scale, A minor scale, back to G. All you need to know is that those chords belong to the key of G, and when you see them, you can play your G major scale. Okay? Now we're going to refine this a little later when we target chord tones, which are the tones that make up each one of those chords. But for now, all you need to know is that you can play your G scale over. So the fourth note of the scale is going to be C. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fourth note of a G scale. Chord that will belong to that will be C major. All right. Fifth note of the scale will be D. And the chord that belongs to that will be D major. So if you just stop right there, if you look at a 1, 4, 5 progression, it would be G, C, D, right? Because we're just naming the notes of the scale there. So at this point, if you saw a G, C, D progression, a 1, 4, 5 progression, then you can play your G scale over all those chords. Now, there's a common problem that people think that when it changes to the C chord, you switch to a C scale, and that's not true. A C scale has an F natural in it. G scale has F sharp. So when you go to C, if we're in the key of G, even though it's going to C, you're going to stay in the key of G and keep playing G scale, which means play that F sharp, believe it or not. Okay? When it goes to D, same idea, you're just going to keep playing G scale. You may start it on a D note, but still the notes of the G scale. Alright? The sixth note of the G major scale is E. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? And the chord that's going to belong to that is E minor. And when you start an E minor, you start on an E note and you play a G major scale over an E minor, you're playing a E natural minor. It's just the notes of the G scale. Okay? So now we have G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, and E minor. So at this point, your 1, 4, 5 chords are major, and the others are minor. Okay, so you have 3 major and 3 minor at this point. Now if we look at the 7th note of the scale, F sharp. The chord that's going to belong to that is an F. That's going to be an F sharp diminished triad. The way the mandolin's set up, I can't play those strings in succession, but it would be F sharp, A, C. I could voice it like this. Here's F sharp, A, and put the C up here. So that's a diminished triad. That means there's a step and a half between each of those notes. And we wouldn't call out a diminished chord, an F sharp diminished chord in folk music, even in rock and roll and a lot of different kinds of music. You get into swing and jazz and you'll hear that pop up as a chord, and when you do, guess what you do? You play your G major scale over it. For our purposes, it has the notes F sharp, C, and A. Well, those are shared with a D7 chord. A D7, the only thing they wouldn't have would be the D note itself, but a D7 chord is D, F sharp. That's common with our F sharp diminished triad. D chord has A, and a D7 chord has C. So that it has those shared notes. And so we treat the F sharp diminished triad the same as we would a 5 chord, which is D. So we basically get rid of it for our purposes. So we have 6 chords that we can play our G major scale over. Alright, I got my buddy Brad Davis here. He's going to play some rhythm guitar for me. What's up, Brad Davis?
Glad to be here, Tim.
Now, you won't see him when he was a kid. He was supposed to be seen and not heard, and here he will be heard and not seen. So he'll be helping me out with the rhythm. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
So of those 6 chords that belong to the key of G, we're going to play over each one. I'm going to play a G major scale over it. I'm going to have Brad play each of those chords, and I'll just play the G major scale against it so you can see that it works and that I'm not lying to you. And we're going to assume that that you know it works over G. You know, if he's playing a G chord, just play a little bit right quick. Probably obvious to you. But I'm going to have him now play an A minor, and I'm just going to randomly grab G scale notes. I won't necessarily just play them in a linear fashion like that, just straight up and down. I can kind of grab them anywhere I want because I know they work. Right? I know they work, so I can just grab them anywhere. So let's play a little A minor now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, and I ended on an A minor, and of course we'll talk about chord tone targeting next, but you can see how the G major scale works with that. Okay, how about a B minor? That's one you wouldn't necessarily expect a G chord, G scale to work with. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's a B minor. G scale is going to work over that. Okay, C chord. You're going to have again a tendency to want to play an F natural there. We're going to plow on through with an F sharp. Okay, so here's G. I'm sorry, C. 1, 2, 3. The F sharp, when I first hit it, probably got on your nerves a little bit, but the more you listen to it, the more it kind of makes sense, and especially if you're putting it in context of a G, other G scale notes and chords that go with it. Your ears are already used to hearing it. When the C pops up, it won't bother you as much. All right, let's try D. Same idea. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, now we'll do E minor. Remember, this, keep in mind, this is all just G scale. We're going to do E minor, and remember, when I start on an E minor note, or an E note, and I play a G major scale, that's our E natural minor, but I don't even have to do that for what we're doing here. All of it's going to be okay. I can start anywhere in the G scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so to kind of simulate what really happens in real life in music, you'll have a lot of chords changing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Brad play randomly any of those 6 chords that we've talked about. And I don't know ahead of time what he's going to do. He's just going to randomly play them, and I'm going to play my G scale. And so you can see, even when they change, you change from C to B minor, A minor, all those chords, it's still going to work. It doesn't matter what you do, you just keep playing G. So here we go. We'll start off with G, and then he'll try to trick me from here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So he played all the chords, all those 6 chords at any given time there. He played them at least once, so you can see how that works. Now we're going to refine this a little bit in the next step, and we're going to target chord tones, and we're going to make it even better.